What is up, YouTube? It is me, HPJ here, and I hope you guys are doing well. Welcome to another, well, actually the return of the deck profile overviews. And it's time to take a look at Fortune Lady. Fortune Lady themselves is an archetype that was built back in 2009. The archetype stretched between three different core sets, and their most recent support was of 2019. So we have the Fortune Ladies that started off in Ancient Prophecy. They got more support in Stardust Overdrive, and in 10 years after that, we received more support in Rising Rampage. So you can understand that a 10-year gap definitely does a lot to a deck. And sadly enough, Fortune Lady, while yes, it has a lot of potential, there's also a lot of failures to this potential because the Fortune Ladies themselves didn't get a lot of the love and support that they really did need, because there's a lot of issues that unfortunately Fortune Ladies just could not keep up with the meta, and that's perfectly fine. And on a casual level, it definitely does struggle because they have a lot of core pieces that most decks, when they get support on the end, it at least boosts them in a casual sense. You know, like, hey, this deck is actually doing well here and here, and it actually has a lot of backbone to it, but unfortunately it's just not in the terms of meta. Which I hate that the meta has to define how well a deck does for it to get support, but unfortunately that or a paycheck keeps Konami going. So this deck initially itself was part of Carly Carmine's whole thing in Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds when she became a Dark Signer. Actually, if you can look at the artwork here of Fortune Lady Past, she is wearing an exact replica of the outfit Carly Carmine wore when she was a Dark Signer. The Fortune Ladies themselves were originally Fortune Fairies, and when she became, a Dark Signer, she then had her deck changed from the Fortune Fairies into the Fortune Ladies. Definitely giving her a lot of power, too, because then Fortune Ladies were definitely something else that most other decks were not. So I honestly have a good portion of my dueling career thanking to the Fortune Ladies, because of the rare occasion where I stepped outside of my comfort zone to actually play an archetype in a deck that people did not expect me to play, and also because money was tight, so I found basically the easiest objects of decks to play around with. And it's sad though, because only 10 years later they finally get a tuner and an actual synchro monster to play around with it. After 2019, you didn't hear much of Fortune Ladies. I did occasionally hear them being in Genesis format, but they have a lot of issues in Genesis. And then there was like this one video that I ran across talking about how it's the worst deck in Edison. But the thing about Edison format was that Edison pushed so many other decks because they had consistency in their support. The decks that a deck like Fortune Ladies didn't have a solid wave of support because there was so many issues with it that too many Achilles heels kept it from really doing what it wanted to do. And that's pretty much what I'm going to talk about in the video itself. So I'm only missing 4 cards from the actual archetype, which are Time Passage, the Quick Play Spell, the Counter Trap, Binding Destiny, which, just to let you know, out of all of these, only maybe one or two of them were actually used, and that is the other 2 cards that I'm going to mention now, which is Inherited Fortune and Slip of Fortune. Slip of Fortune technically isn't a Fortune Lady card, but it does have usage with the Fortune Ladies because it was used in the anime, and people who were building the Fortune Lady deck also did use the Slip of Fortune. And Inherited Fortune was a really good trap, but it was a very long... It's one of those traps that it takes longer to set up with than it should. But for the other cards that I do have, I have Fortune Lady Past, Fortune Lady Light, Fortune Lady Fire, Fortune Lady Wind, Fortune Lady Water, Fortune Lady Dark, Fortune Lady Earth, Fortune Lady Every. I have Solitary Magician, I have the Cabazalis and the Witch of Fate, which is a similarly good monster. Doesn't really have much ties to the Fortune Ladies, but it's someone I did not want to exclude out of this video. Future Visions, Fortune's Vision, Fortune's Future, Fortune Lady Calling, and Fortune Lady Rewind. As I just move everybody over just a little bit. I don't know why this one isn't moving over a little bit, but okay, there we go. So yeah, that is all the Fortune Lady associated cards and Fortune Lady cards that I do have. And I'm going to be very honest with you. There's a lot of ties into the Fortune Ladies that I feel like there is a lot of it needing to help boost it. First, they need a lot more support to help them speed up the process of putting more of them onto the board, because staggering on one at a time doesn't really help. And with your only real special summoning coming between Fortune Lady Light, Fortune Lady Dark, and Fortune Lady Calling, you don't really have that much there. I would say Fortune Lady Rewind, but you also have to set up for that card as well. Which, in terms, it shouldn't be too hard if you use conceptual monsters to help with that, or the abilities of monsters like Fortune Lady Pass. But the thing is that the Fortune Ladies, when I played them, we went more chaos than we did a pure fortune build, because the chaos engine itself really just helped tie in a lot of things. I threw in stuff like Kinkabayu, Chaos Sorcerer, BLS, Dimensional Ground, not Dimensional Grounds, Different Dimension Gate, DDG. I even threw in stuff like Dark Core and stuff, just to help trigger Fortune Lady Light, so that the other Fortune Ladies could come into play, and then I can use their abilities when more Fortune Ladies are on the field to then speed it up. I think they had a good idea with Fortune's Vision and Fortune Lady Calling to help speed up the process and search out for things. But the problem with the Fortune Ladies is that they don't have a consistency of things. Because you can be a cohesive deck. You have every member in your lineup be an attribute, be a type, or have a consistency within those. But if the consistency isn't strong, it makes the deck fall apart. And when people look at Edison and say, why were Fortune Ladies not as playable as they tended to be later on, and it's simple. It's because the support was very scarce, and they rather focus on the things that were making them money than the things that weren't. And when they did decide, hey, let's put Fortune Lady into the lineup, you see how well that went. Shout outs to Fortune Lady Pass because Fortune Lady Pass and Fortune Lady Every for being those additional pieces that were needed 10 years later, but still gave a value to the Fortune Ladies and how stacked on the process was to finally have that synchro and that tuner, because Fortune Ladies didn't even have a synchro monster, nor were they really capable of it, despite the fact that they're an archetype that manipulates level. They had a quick play spell that manipulated level, allowing them to go up or down depending on how much of the level they had. You even look at a monster like Solitaire Magician. Solitaire Magician manipulated level on a Fortune Lady as well, so that she could help destroy a monster on the board, which was a good insight there too. But you then start to realize that, the Fortune Ladies kind of really don't have much. They don't have any way to really summon them to the field outside of their own card effects. There's no recruiter that can special summon them, because they don't have a base attack and defense points, which is one of the biggest Achilles heels, is that because they don't have any attack or defense, there's not any monsters or spells or traps that actually go out and search for these cards that have question mark attack or defense. They can only really search for them for name or for type. There was even reasons why people were using cards like Magical Dimension, a couple of spellcaster support here and there, like Apprentice Magician and stuff, to bring out the Fortune Ladies themselves and to keep the deck itself going. It's crazy though, because when you look at a spellcaster archetype like the Charmers, you've seen them get major waves of support. And you think, honestly, why not try that with Fortune Lady and give them a go? But Konami rather hit that nostalgia or hit that lore factor than actually help support an archetype that was in the anime for a handful of episodes, and then the character just became someone that was in the back. And that's pretty much how it was. I do appreciate the Fortunately archetype and how everything itself pans out, because not only do you have level manipulation, you have draw power, you have monster removal, you have mediocre back row removal, which tends to happen. You have a monster that does burn damage. You have two monsters that special summons. One does it from the deck, the other one does it from the graveyard. You have a monster who became their boss monster 10 years later and basically helps out not only banishing threats, but also putting herself back to the board by banishing a Fortune Lady to then interact with other supportive cards of the Fortune archetype to keep them going. And I'm not even saying this is a bad thing, because if you combine the Fortune Ladies with the Fortune Fairies, you actually get something even more cohesive. But it shouldn't have took two separate variants of the Fortune archetype to put together. And even more so, if I did a whole video on it, which I have, the Fortune Ladies and the Fortune Fairies could easily work together if they had more cards that tied them together. It's just that the Fortune Fairies have attack and defense points, while the Fortune Ladies don't. So you have to rely on them being spellcasters, or find a way to say, hey, if this card has Fortune in its name, do these insert actions here. And then throw in a couple of hand traps just to keep them viable. But that is just unfortunately how Yu-Gi-Oh stuff works. Could I easily build a deck for the current meta to fit in with the Fortune Ladies? No, because a lot of it would be very difficult. I've seen a lot of people just do fun decks and stuff like that, which that's possible too. And even more so, look in the Edison format to build a variation of Fortune Ladies to circulate around an Edison S build. It'd be a lot difficult because a lot of cards at that time were still semi-limited in certain cases where they were actually useful to Fortune Lady. And then you still have to work around Magical Dimension. So, yeah, there's a lot of Achilles heels to this archetype, but it was still one of those things where you look back at it and you're like, yeah, this has potential. It's just, unfortunately, Konami put the potential in other decks and other archetypes just for the glory of what it was. That checkbook. So, yeah, that's pretty much going to round out my video for the Fortune Ladies. I hope you guys enjoy it. If you guys have any more questions and stuff, you can leave them in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. With that said, HPJ signing out. Take care.